Eastman's built a reputation for handcrafted guitars that punch well above their price point, but how close do they really get to the legends they're inspired by? This is Eastman versus the World, a three-part series where we're pitting Eastman guitars up against their legendary American counterparts. Today we're checking out acoustics. We're also going to be doing semi-hollows and solid bodies as well, so make sure you subscribe to the channel to be notified when those ones come out. If you want to hear a simple back-to-back comparison without any chat or opinions, click the link up here now. So, who are Eastman guitars? Hand-built and crafted in Beijing, they showcase some of the best guitars coming out of China. They model most of their guitars on American classics, but they do make some of their own designs as well. Their philosophy is not to make the cheapest guitars, but the best ones coming out of China. So, let's meet the contenders. For the Parlour shootout, I've chosen an E6 LG-SS TC, that's thermo-cured top, from the Eastman lineup, and we are going to be pitting it against a Gibson L00 standard. For the Grand Auditorium shootout, I've got Eastman's limited edition AC 622 CE Koa, and we're putting that up against Taylor's 724 CE. For the final comparison, we're doing a Dreadnought shootout. I've gone for Eastman's E10D TC, another thermo-cured top, and we're pitting that up against a Martin D18. Alright, so that's both of the small body, the Parlours back to back. First thing I noticed was the neck profile on both guitars. The Gibson is much slimmer than the Eastman counterpart. I don't think that's a bad thing because a lot of people like chunky necks, a lot of people like slim necks too. So I wouldn't say one's better than the other. I just think if you've got larger hands, you might prefer that. Other things, this is a little bit lighter, the Gibson. Again, it's not a massive amount, but some people really like guitars, so this would be more suitable. Playability. So we talked about the neck profile, we talked about the weight. Playability of both. The Gibson was a smidge easier, and I do just mean a little bit. It wasn't, night and day. They're both set up fairly similarly. So, coming out of the factory, I think they're both actually set up really nicely. Sound-wise, personally, I think the Eastman had a little bit more bottom end in there, which for a small body guitar isn't the most necessary thing, but it's kind of nice. I think when people play a Parlour guitar, for me, it's a sofa at home guitar. It's not what I'm going to take out and gig. It's going to be used in a smaller room. So having a little bit more bass response in there just to fill it out wasn't the worst thing in the world. But again, personal preference. I wouldn't say one's miles better than the other, just slightly different. Let's get on to the next ones. Okay, so there's the Grand Auditorium shootout. First up, let's talk about neck profiles like we did with the Parlours as well. Again, similar setup. Taylor's got a slimmer neck profile, not better or worse, just slimmer than the Eastman. But again, the Eastman wasn't like a really big, thick, chunky neck, just maybe a little bit more on the shoulders. Next up, let's talk about playability. So I found that the Eastman was a smidge easier to play than the Taylor, partly because I think the action was a smidge lower on there. It wasn't a lot, but that always helps. Next up, in terms of tone, you get a little bit more low mids from the Eastman, as we did with the Parlour, but I would say the sound was slightly more articulate with the Taylor. All right, let's check out the final comparison, the Dreadnoughts. All right, so the final comparison. So we had the D18 and the E10D, the Dreadnought shootout. Similar thing, we'll start off with neck profile. Again, Eastman's a little bit chunkier. The Martin was a little bit slimmer. In fact, this has been one of the slimmest necks. I think maybe the Gibson might edge it, but yeah, definitely a slimmer profile on the D18. Again, I didn't mention it in the last one, but in terms of weight, the American counterparts have all been lighter than the other ones. So, you know, something to consider. If you want a really lightweight guitar, go for an American one. Sound-wise, I would say this is one of the tightest comparisons, actually, the Dreadnoughts. The sound's a bit more complex again with the Martin, just had some extra overtones in there, but in terms of like the volume and the heft you get out of the Eastman, pretty good. Something I noticed as well, on the Parlour and the Dreadnought shootout, I'd actually replaced the strings with some uncoated ones. Eastman send coated strings on all their guitars, which in a shop is a great thing. However, I think that kills the tone a little bit. So if you are thinking about buying an Eastman, if you do get one, change the strings out for some uncoated ones. They sound so much better on there. Okay, so we've heard all three guitars back to back now. I've given you my conclusion on how each comparison sounded. It'd be great to hear what you think as well, so make sure you put that in the comments below. Now that we've done the back-to-back comparison with all three, let's talk about the overall differences between them in terms of like craftsmanship, fit and finish, things like that. Now, having played the three, compared them to the other three, there are some refinements, I would say, with the American guitars that the Eastmans haven't quite got yet. But, you know, I mean, they've come a really long way. They're a fairly new company. And I think what you feel is the finish is slightly better on the American ones. The finish on all the Eastmans is a little bit thicker. Each guitar is a little bit heavier. The neck profile's maybe a bit more chunky. And I think those little things they could just trim a tiny bit, and actually what we're talking about is like a 10% difference in the guitars, but with a massive price difference. So what I would say, if you're thinking about buying one of these guitars, you know, instead of buying one of the American counterparts, it's not the case that you're buying an affordable guitar that happens to look like, you know, one of the legendary American guitars. You're buying a really, really good guitar that's a lot cheaper than its American counterpart, but it's not super budget, you know, it's not something that wouldn't be worth repairing, let's say. So, I mean, we take the D18, for example, that's a £3,000 guitar at the moment. Say you need to get, I don't know, a refret done in 10 years' time. It's going to cost you £300, 10% of the value. That's pretty doable. If you buy a lot of Chinese-made guitars that are £300 alone, you're not going to refret that thing in 10 years. It'd be better just to chuck it in the bin, you know, buy a new one. However, Eastman guitar, I think the E10, for example, that we were comparing to the D18, that is like a £1,500 guitar, just below that. So having it refretted is well worth having it done. And I think that's the difference between Eastman and a lot of the other Chinese brands. So to summarize then, why would you buy an Eastman guitar over an American one? If you're not bothered with logos, branding, things like that, Eastman's a killer choice. You're going to save a hefty amount of money and you're going to be getting a really solid guitar that is maybe 10% off what the American counterparts are. However, if you've got to have the logo, you've got to have the look, if you want the refinement, get the American versions. Okay, so that's it from this comparison. I hope you've enjoyed it. As I said earlier, we're going to be doing this as a mini-series, 3 parts. This is the acoustic one done with. Next up, we are going to be doing semi-hollows. So make sure you subscribe to be notified on when the next installment comes out and any of our other content too.